Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a really special edition of our Inside Coach webinar conversations here with Beyond Pulse. So delighted to be able to welcome our four special guests to the show today. Familiar faces to many of you that have obviously been enduring the online education that's been on offer from the start of lockdown. So delighted to be able to welcome four of the people that have been some of the most active voices and faces within our industry over the last few months, and obviously integral figures to the education that's on offer across the country as well. So joining me, Tom Shields and Mr. Mark Wilson, are Skye Eddy from Soccer Parenting, obviously Paul Bright from the Coaching Manual, David Copeland-Smith from Beastmode Soccer, and Mr. Gary Curneen from Modern Soccer Coach. So to all of you, thank you so very much for freeing up your time to chat here today. The way that this is going to work for people listening with us now, we will stage a couple of questions for the panelists. Obviously, as ever, there is a chat function at the top of your screen where if there's something specific that you would like to ask any of the guests today, please feel free, and myself or Mark will try and redirect our attention, the conversation in that direction. If not, obviously, please just keep your microphones turned off and your webcams, microphones muted, sorry, and your webcams turned off so that there's no interference on the line, and we can get cracking and look forward to diving into, as we said, the content of the conversation, which is going to be what we all learned in lockdown. And with the caliber of guests that you've had, I'm sure we're in for a very interesting conversation. So first of all, thank you again for your time. Let's do this. Let's jump right in, and we'll start just with a short question to each of you. If you could describe your lockdown experience in one word, what would it be? And Mr. Curneen, we'll start with you.
My word would be adapt.
Brilliant. Mr. Bright?
I would say reflection, biggest one.
Skye? Oh, have we lost? Go on, Dave. You can jump in while we get Skye back.
My word would be helpful.
Brilliant. And Skye, now that you're back with us?
I'm back. Clarifying.
Clarifying. Lovely. Thank you very much. I'm sure people listening, you guys will be in a very similar position. I'm sure the guys will be able to explain a little more about where their words came from as they answer some of the questions that will be posed to them throughout this. So maybe we'll start right there with this question. Has there been a guest that has made you reflect on your own practices and behaviors, either as an active coach, maybe a boss or a business owner, a parent, or just an individual, that the most, and why, and maybe how is that tied to the answer that you gave to the experience so far? So Skye, while you're still unmuted, let's head to you first.
Sure. I was really struck by a webinar that I hosted in April. I think it was middle of April. And I had two parents, two coaches, and a clinical psychologist on talking about motivation for children. And this was just as it was starting to be a little overwhelming for the players and all of the at-home training they were doing. It was starting to get a little overwhelming for some. And so we were talking about motivation strategies, and Ryan Defebaugh he's actually a licensed professional counselor, not a clinical psychologist. That's probably a big clarification. And he is a soccer coach. He works for Potomac Soccer, but he does a lot of performance work for players. And the conversation shifted in that webinar to wellness and well-being of these children. And I think that for me, that was I use the word clarifying. It was a big clarifying moment, because a lot of the work that I do is with soft skills. I don't like that term. You use that, I use that. I think they're really essential skills. And what happened during COVID and this lockdown is that those soft skills really did become essential. And that was really clear for all of us. And I think that my conversation with Ryan and his comments during that webinar really gave me this real big picture thought that the work that we are doing, the impact that we have, the connections that we have with these players and their families is actually a lifeline for some of them right now, truly. And it's just essential work. So, you know, that for me was just a moment where my mindset shifted. And I also, you know, really got a lot of clarity about how important our work is. We all know that, but it really struck me.
Perfect, thank you. Brighty, I'll come to you. Obviously, a lot of yours have been heavily around coaches that are operating at elite levels, at elite ends of the game. Anything specific that has stood out for you?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate, you know, to have some fantastic guests, and we wanted to give that insight through the coaching manual into, you know, what goes on at the elite level, at every level, in terms of different age groups and all the way through to senior, both in the Premier League and international level. And the key message is these coaches are still dealing with people. Like we all are, every coach, you know, we're dealing with people first and foremost. You know, Mike Phelan, who we'll all know all too well, was great. But I think on a personal level, there was 2 webinars for me which really made me think and reflect. And the first one was with Lee Johnson, Dean Holden and Mac, who are the Bristol City first team staff. So they're they were pushing towards promotion to the Premier League. And the level of detail on a day-to-day that Lee and Dean and Jamie and his team were doing was crazy. But they were always bringing it back, and the key pieces were humility and being good people and checking in on your players as people first, and that's at an elite level. And the same I'd say with Austin McPhee and Aaron Hughes. Austin McPhee, the assistant manager with the Northern Ireland national team, and how the processes they followed to get Northern Ireland into the top 20 in the world, from being ranked 113th, I think. And it sounds all elite, and I can't do that. But the messages were always the same across all of it, in terms of, you know, have your plans, have your processes, but remember you're dealing with people all the time. So even with that insight, it brought it back for me that we're dealing with people all the time, and let's have it right. As a coach, you've got to be able to deal with people. You know, some coaches, you know, you got to check on that, and does your personality match where you can deal with people and get the best out of people and be empathetic and humble with that. So everyone we've spoke to, no matter what the level, has come across in that way, in my opinion.
Perfect. Thank you, Brighty. Great answer. And Willow, I think probably something that you and I both would emphasize there as well with a lot of the guests that we've had. So David, coming to you next. Obviously, you've done an awful lot of great work, heavily for the benefit of players, but obviously there's some great insight in there for the coaches that are working with them as well. So your key takeaways?
Yeah, so obviously a lot of ours has been player driven. So, you know, the first round of calls we were doing was technical stuff. We did an accountability challenge, and that one really opened my eyes at how people can help people, right? Kind of carrying on from what Paul said. So we had, you know, a few thousand players sign up, and we would go on Instagram Live, and basically I was just the talking head, and the players were keeping each other accountable. What I loved about it was they didn't know each other before this. Like, we've got kids in like Thailand talking to kids in Charlotte, North Carolina, and now I see on social media they're buddies, and it's great. And the other one that's been huge for me personally, by being selfish, is a guy called Pepe Galvan. And you know, Pepe is not a huge name, but he he works on the mental performance side with the Mexican national team, women and men, bunch of Liga MX teams, MLS teams. And we did this 10-day challenge for players because I think we all know, like, the mental side is criminally underrated. And I found myself joining in. And little things that Pepe has said to me, because I feel like all of us here are here because we're obsessed, right? And we're probably obsessed with competitors, and we're obsessed with this and that. And he was talking to a player who's like 15, 16, but he may as well have been talking to me. And what that, you know, it's opened my eyes that I need a lot of work on myself, right, to reach my peak performance doing what I do now. Is that I can take a lot of what I've been teaching for years, and I've always said this about myself: I'll give great advice, don't necessarily take that same advice and run with it. And it's exposed me because I need to start doing it. So, you know, there have been so many people that I think have done a fantastic job with us, but I would say Pepe has really opened my eyes. And, you know, we got a message yesterday. In fact, do you mind if I read it?
No, of course, mate.
I feel like this really opens my eyes to it all, because you guys are probably the same. Like, you completely underestimate what you do, and you don't know how much of an impact you're having. So this was just sent to us. But as a parent who has been following along the 10-day mental challenge in the Zoom sessions with my 14-year-old daughter, I just want to say thank you. I've seen an incredible mindset transformation in the last 10 days, and I've been wishing to see for years. She's played on the top team for 6 years, and all the coaches say that she's had a mental block that is keeping her from her potential. Great in practice, but she can't translate it into games. No one's given us any practical guidance. This program has been a huge game changer for her, and I can't wait to see how it unfolds in the years to come. And that, like, hit me, right? Because I'm like, here we are, just throwing out content that I think that, you know, some players will relate to. And then you get a message like that, and you're like, oh, like, it's actually, like, really good, you know. And just little things like that have kind of opened my eyes to what kind of an impact. And, you know, I'm humbled to be in this group right now, because you guys are all phenomenal at what you do, and the amount that you've helped people during this awful time, it will always be remembered.
Thank you, Dave. It's a great story, and obviously the sentiments that you share are returned straight back to you. I do think, just touching upon that, I guess every one of us, the content that we put out, and every day we hope that, you know, it becomes worth it if there's just if one coach can cling on to one bit of information, and it changes or transcends the way that they interact with their players. It all becomes worth it. And obviously, Dave, when you get those little thank you notes, I'm sure that's an incredible experience. So thank you for that. Gary, what I've been amazed by with your content is the breadth of guests and the breadth of subjects and topic areas that you've delved into, and really curious here as to what's kind of stuck out the most for you throughout this process.
Yeah, this question or this session has kind of made me reflect on why I ask people to come on. And, like, I guess I compartmentalize a lot of football, and then you try in modern soccer coach, you try and make it, you know, give different viewpoints, because I think in social media today, especially in the soccer community, there's a big danger of groupthink with someone promoting the same thing over and over and over again. So I want it to be different. But then what I find from a personal point of view, like, what I find interesting and fascinating, and David mentioned they're obsessed, is like, how does it all connect together? How does the tactical piece connect to, you know, an environment? How does the philosophy piece connect to going into practices and sessions? And so I think in that case, the coaches or the presenters who who probably went above and beyond their station in connecting it, were brought on to produce something or to talk about something on this, and then went above the scope. So like Chris Little was brought on to talk about a tactical piece, and then off he went on development and environments. And then I think Jim McGuinness was brought on, and Jim would have been a personal, because I had his background in Gaelic football in Ireland, and he just touched a lot of connection points. But the one that actually, upon reflection, that I was a bit nervous about was Martin O'Neill, because if you're looking at modern soccer coach and you're looking at Martin O'Neill, you're probably thinking that the two of them don't connect at all based on reputation. So, but I know from like my friends and stuff and a lot of Irish supporters is like, he's one of the most ruthless people in an interview. So how am I going to communicate to Martin O'Neill that, hey, without him hanging up the phone, are you really into all the science and stuff? But in that 10-minute window that I actually managed to do it without him getting off the call, I think he just proved like the danger of shallow thinking in coaching and looking at a headline and thinking that someone's a dinosaur when they're not, and jumping to conclusions. Is that like Martin O'Neill just in a lovely way just said that, you know, I understand analysis, I understand data, I understand science, but I don't prioritize it ahead of this, and this. And I thought that was a lovely way to be like, that's the way coaching should be, and that's probably why you've been at the cutting edge of it for 25 years. And that was a major takeaway for me. So a lot of what I tend to do is, from a personal viewpoint, is I like to frame something in my head, and then I like to jump on the call and try to get that proved wrong. And there was a few people that did that there without confronting them about it or being a jerk about it. And there was a few people that did that, but Martin O'Neill did it in a really gracious way. So that was a big learning one for me.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, mate. And I do think, you know, you said there about jumping to conclusions, and I think for just us as, and I'll speak kind of more candidly to the youth coaches, maybe there are barriers to entry sometimes when we do that as practitioners, right? And people will always kind of will make an assumption about you before perhaps having the opportunity to listen to you work and watch you work. So, you know, just on that, the importance of first impressions and being buttoned up and having the ability to obviously confound those kind of assumptions is key. And it's great to hear how he did that kind of so eloquently. So thank you for that, guys. That's really really interesting stuff. Kind of moving more specifically to each of you now, and as I said, please feel free to add to this if you think there is anything that the first person answering didn't kind of capture that you think would be a benefit. But Brighty, I'm coming to you first on this one. Is there going to be any significant change for you in terms of your coaching, in terms of the process, methodology, or philosophy moving out of lockdown, based on any of the advice that you've received or kind of what you've learned throughout this time?
Yes, great question, Tom. And again, I think there's been so much brilliant content put out there by, you know, people on this call and outside of this call as well. And I think the biggest thing that I've tried to do from the outset is try to really find the things what on a personal level resonate with me, that I'm interested in. Otherwise, coaches can be overwhelmed because you'll end up picking an idea up off one of Gary's webinars one day and then off one of yours, and all of a sudden you're all over the place. It's got to match with what you believe in, first, what you stand for, first of all, what you believe in, how you think the game should be played, and most importantly, what benefit you think it will add to your players. To answer your question directly, significantly, what's going to change? Nothing. Absolutely nothing significantly. But it's going to be the little things what change and the little ideas that I try to implement and just picking up the nuances from other coaches. And I said reflection at the start, right? I've been coaching for nearly 20 years and working in the professional game in the UK at all different age groups, and then coming and taking director positions in the US. I don't think I've ever had this length of time to actually stop and truly think about what I do and how I do it. So a big positive, if we can set positives out of this time period, is reflection of how you as a person and you as a coach operate, but always bringing it back to, am I doing the best by the players? What is going to move forwards? And I don't think it's just me. I think this could be globally, and I hope it is there's been this debate recently about you shouldn't teach technique in isolation. You should only ever teach game-based activities and, you know, linked to the perception, action, coupling, and decision-making from a game. It's not worth teaching technique in isolation. For one, personally, I've never agreed with that. I think there's a time and a place for everything. I think you need to teach the game. I think you need to support players in terms of technical development. However, we have a unique opportunity now, because if these players have been at home and practicing the technical skills on their own, touches against ball on a wall, falling in love with the ball, falling in love with their own development, taking ownership of their own development, then when they come back to practice, I've challenged all my players. I want to see who's better technically than when we finish training, because then that accelerates coaches' ability to actually teach the game, because we know players can deal with the ball. And ultimately, if you can't deal with the ball, you can't get your head up. If you can't get your head up, you can't read the game and make decisions based on what's around you. So I'm hoping that the change is we end up with a generation who could be technically the best generation that we've seen in 20, 30 years. I hope that's the case. But again, it's bigger than that. I'd probably just focus on two technical, tactical areas. I think what will change is my contact with my players in terms of checking in all the time. I mean, we're all experts on Zoom and GoToMeeting, and I've got every one of them, me, Hangouts, Zoom, you know, all of them, Teams. But just I do a fun quiz on a Thursday with my players, and we did one on the European Championships the other day, and just throwing out crazy questions. But it's not even about that. It's about the interaction with the players, with each other as people, and just some sense of, you know, social bonding and being together as a group of players in a team environment, because that's the biggest thing they're missing out on. Not the football. The football is on tap. It's that interaction as well. So there's going to be changes, absolutely. I'm hoping for the better. Not going to be significant, because I'm pretty clear in how I want to do things personally as a coach, and that will always ebb and flow and change. But I think it's going to be the little things what ultimately we all know add up to the bigger piece and make the difference. So I hope I answered your question there without going on. Perfect,
mate. And I'm gonna turn to Dave in a little bit to maybe build on one of the things that you've just spoken about. But yeah, I think it is so important, and it's again to go back to the work that everybody's done. I don't think, you know, Paul, you've sat there and said that everybody should have their own idea of how things should be played, and the little nuggets of information that you receive from this should just filter in to support things and try and evolve. It's not looking to brainwash anybody. So it's a great suggestion to just be smart with what you're looking to and how you can kind of find things to support, you know, your development in different areas. Gary, I'm curious with you whether any of the conversations have highlighted things that, you know, you could be doing better, or perhaps reaffirmed things that you or your peers are doing well, or that you see being done well. Could you shed any light on that? Because I think sometimes we get bashed for, you know, the US, it's not as good as development system in the rest of the world and things like that. You know, personally, I think there's some exceptional work going on in clubs of all levels here and at every level of the game. I'm just curious as to whether any of your conversations highlighted that.
Yeah, just on Brady's there, it's like all the information's great. In the last 3 months, there's been unbelievable amount of content that's been coming out of every single day, but without the ability to reflect on how it relates to your world, but also the ability to be honest with yourself. And that's where, you know, I think then you're separating probably about 80% of coaches with 20%, and I think that's where the top will go. And unfortunately, I'd be cynical on that there, just by working around coach education in the last 3 or 4 years. I just think self-awareness is a big problem that we have, and you know, the ability to be honest with yourself, and bringing that back, then that's something that I and I'm not saying I'm brilliant at it, because that's something that I find in every conversation that I have. Now, it's a cliche, you learn something from everyone you talk to, but what exactly are you learning? So I would say probably the one that jumped out would have been Paul McVeigh, who messaged me and said that he was coming on to basically start an argument. So I thought, oh, brilliant, sure, go on ahead. But he was actually, I wouldn't be like him. I wouldn't be like him at all. But it was actually about, like, where David's talking about that he felt that the trainer was talking. I felt that Paul was talking to me 5 minutes in, and I felt that he was having a pop for the next 45 minutes. And about 20 minutes in, I was like, he's right. And his argument was, again, we've said it, and I say David said it, criminally neglected, or I think what you said about the mental aspect of the game, and he was coming at it. Obviously, he put his bias on the table right away, but then he starts putting ways in where it's not. And I would have been a coach, or I am a coach who thinks that I do prioritize the mental part of the game. But when you have someone telling you that you don't, because you don't do X, Y, and Z, then all of a sudden, you start thinking. And I'm doing a bit of writing at the minute, and I'm doing a chapter on. I've no book to plug here, so it's not a plug. But I'm doing a chapter on how does a coach get feedback? And it's very, very difficult for a coach to find out weak areas. Very, very easy to find out what you do well as a coach, because you put a system and you win. It's very, very difficult to find out what you don't do well, because number one, people don't tell you, but number two, normally the things that weaknesses in coaches are stuff that they don't do, not mistakes that they make. And you don't do is like you neglect a conversation, or you neglect an aspect of the game, or you neglect a department that you're not overseeing. So bringing that back, then that's where I kind of shifted where my mindset was. I brought on goalkeeper coaches just to basically keep them quiet, and all of a sudden I realized that I need to be better in this area as well. Like this goalkeeper coaches are way better than I thought they were in terms of relating their models of development to the game. And after about 3 or 4 weeks, I'm thinking, some of these goalkeeper models of development are actually better than models of development that I presented for outfield players. So it's been humbling from that standpoint. But again, I go back to, I think for a coach where it's like, this is amazing. It's like Christmas Day. Every day you've got information. You've got to be able to go back and almost start in the deficit and say, like, I'm at 50% here, and as opposed to thinking that I'm at 90% and there's just 1 or 2 things I can take from everyone. You gotta, like, I listen to as many podcasts and webinars as I can over the minute, because I think this is a golden time to get access to some practitioners that you're never going to get access to again. And if it's Brady bringing on Mike Phelan and I can't get Mike Phelan, then I have to go and listen to that podcast, because I can't, there's no other way, and I think that's how we should look at it as coaches.
Yeah, perfect. Willow, you looked like you're about to speak, but I don't know if you were.
Again, I'm becoming a better listener for all of these webinars, and certainly more self-reflective. And it gets me thinking about, if we're spending all this time learning, I hope we're not going to deceive ourselves when we go back to some kind of normality in our behavior. And that was another problem that I recognized in the way I was looking at the things I was learning, and I've had this focus on behavior and affecting behavior change for the last probably 18 months. And then I read an interesting book that was followed up by a couple of suggested peer-reviewed papers. I am turning into a nerd as I get into my 40s, and certainly reading a lot more than I ever did. And it talked about the deception of behavior. Based on the context, anybody, based on the information they get, can change their behavior. You can act however you want in a certain environment, but it doesn't necessarily mean you've bought into the culture of whatever environment you're in. Therefore, the thing you've got to monitor, and some of the key KPIs are, how do you measure change of thought? So how do you measure the state of mind that's been changed? And it really started to get me thinking about, I do see behavioral change in some of the sessions I deliver, or with some of the interactions I have with individuals, but how do I know they've really bought in? How do I know that there's going to be some longevity to what I'm seeing now, and that they've really bought into the why and the culture behind what's being created? So one of my key learnings has been to look deeper into that piece, but also how am I going to take action on that and measure it to help the people who supported me in this time improve, get better, and learn. And how do I make sure I can measure that, if that makes sense? So to all four of you, and we'll start with David. How do you think you might do that, and do you think that's an important piece of what you might do within your environment or with your players and people you interact with moving forward?
Yeah, so again, like in this group, I kind of feel like the odd one out, right? Because I don't work with teams. But what this has given me a chance to do is get hyper specific with, I wouldn't necessarily call it a model. I just look at it as the way I do things with. So when we onboard new players, you know, we have them write out their goals and everything like that. And what I've learned from watching other people now is it needs to be a lot more in depth. And what I've tended to stay away from in the past, which is my fault, is interacting with the players' coaches. And I say it's my fault, but you know, when I've tried it in the past, coaches, I don't know, like, they usually like just shoo me away like I'm an annoyance, which I probably am. But so now the way that our system works is we, number one, sit down with a player, and I've been doing this on Zoom. Sit down with a player, figure out, you know, where they are, where they want to go, and then I've been encouraging them to speak to their coach. And I finished it 2 days ago actually. And there's like 25 questions that I want the coach to answer, just to get their perspective, because I feel like in the past I've seen something and then I just block everything else out. Right? Whether that's, I guess it's arrogance, right? It's like, well, I know how to fix it, instead of bringing on other people's perspectives. So the way it's going to work now, and again, it's up to the coach whether they do it or not. And then I'm asking the players to ask their teammates what they think that they need to improve on. And we're doing this with, you know, 12-year-olds right up to the pro players. And then I've actually got a solid base to work from. So with me, like realistically, what I've learned about myself is I need to open up way more. And I'm not a social person anyway. I'm actually quite antisocial. But I've got to open up more. I've always been good with criticism, but I've got to take a lot more criticism from people and use it the right way. And then I'm putting this system out there for everybody to use it. Because one thing that I've really learned is that I used to get really annoyed, honestly, when you see our stuff and then people clone it and put it out there, and they don't, you know, say, hey, this was inspired by whatever. And I've learned that that's worthless as well. Like, why do I feel like that? Right? So I've learned so much about myself and my systems that we're like 85% there. I'm not as quick as Gary at putting this stuff out, but put a system in place for individual development, get way more specific with it, because what I've found is that during this time, obviously, people were immediately like, Beastmode Soccer drills were, you know, whatever app they're using or whatever YouTube channels they're using. And the hard thing is, my biggest fear right now is that this is one big band-aid, right? And when coaches get back to their teams and it's like somewhat normal, it's just gone out the window. The whole like individual technical development portion of it is going to go back to like, you shouldn't do that, you're a circus clown. And I'm determined to try and change that view. So, Wilco, I don't know if it even answered you, mate. I went on to a different tangent. But
in a very creative way, yes.
Yeah. But you know, it's like I've learned a lot about myself, and my systems need to improve. And mentally, I think we've all learned a lot, right? Like about who we are. Because sat in a room for hours and hours at a time, staring at Gmail will do that to you. So yeah, I hope that answered that question.
So I'm gonna take this in a slightly different direction and blend it into the next question for you, Skye. Obviously, what the answers that David and Gary and Paul have all just given there, for me, they're great demonstrations of the importance of vulnerability, of humility, of honesty, of kind of just being very open with yourself and with your peers, and obviously in a public forum, they're great examples of kind of behaviors that coaches should be modeling. But kind of following that, can you tell me about the thing that's most inspired you during lockdown in regards to the coaching and youth soccer space?
Yeah. One of the sort of terms or quotes that I use a lot is the power of good people coming together. And that has been the biggest inspiration for me. I have been so excited to see clubs and coaches really striving, getting out of their comfort zone, trying new things, really as they're working to serve the needs of families and players. I've been really inspired by coaches taking this responsibility very seriously and learning. I also was really taken aback at the time. I sort of referenced it before, where the players seem to get overwhelmed with all the technical training. Dave, I'm curious if you felt that as well, like that moment there. It seemed like about 6 weeks in, where everyone's like, "Oh, this is enough," and I was so inspired at that time by how coaches shifted. And Dr. Jerry Lynch is one of my favorite sports psychologists. He's so impactful, and he has this this term love, that's listening, understanding, and validating. And I feel like coaches, without even realizing it, did that. And they really brought this concept of love, of listening to what the players needed, understanding where they were, where their mindset was individually as individual players, speaking to the individual, and then really validating and supporting. So those are all really, really inspirational to me. And then, or personally for me, I felt a lot like everyone here was saying about the need for growth and change and reflection. I was really inspired in my work to work harder to really help parents understand the need that they have to learn more about athlete development, about functional movement, about just those essential skills, and that there's a sincere role that a parent plays in that. So I guess those would be my takeaways.
Perfect. And Dave, I am going to come back to you now with just a segue from Skye's question, and it blends a little bit about what Paul had spoken about earlier of this time being a great one for the players to develop an affinity and a love of them and the ball. But I am curious, yeah, Skye, it's a great point. Is there a concern, Dave, that there was maybe too much of an emphasis on the technical stuff? Because
yeah, 100%. I feel like people wanted a drink out of the water fountain, and after about 6 weeks, they were getting a fire hydrant in their mouth, right? And the fact is, technical training, if you do the same stuff all the time, it gets boring, right? It's just fact. So what we had to do is, and this is what we did in our accountability challenge, is obviously technical training is my livelihood. And I always say this to players, it's one cog in a massive wheel, right? And every piece of that machine is very important. And what we started to do with the accountability challenge was put in game analysis. And what players were telling me is if they didn't do like their technical training, they started to feel guilty about it. And that's no way to fall in love with anything, is it, if you feel bad about it? So we started to add other little things like the mental training, portion. And what we were doing with the analysis is like, right, if you've got one of these, you've got to leave it outside of the room. You've got a piece of paper, and basically we just wanted them to break down each team's formation, try and get their style of play, who was the game changer, what player played your position, what did they do well, what did they do poorly, which players struggled with because they didn't want to get online and be like, well, you know, I think Ronaldo could have done this better, because you know they didn't want to be that person who's like 15 years old telling everybody that Ronaldo's not very good at this thing. And what we've seen, there's a kid called Sydney Shank. I don't know where she lives, but she's always in our stuff. And you can go on Twitter, and some of the analysis this kid did, it was so in depth. I think she's like 15, 16. And what we started to do with the technical part is, Paul mentioned it earlier, is having them own it. So we would give them drills to do, but I always say, you've got to change it to you. And we had players that, there was a few of them like young, like 7, 8 years old, and they would email me their session plans, and they've written everything out. So they're designing everything themselves. And I feel like that was a huge tipping point for me, because what I noticed is when you give the player that kind of responsibility, they were buying in immediately. Now, I think there are two types of, not just players, but people. There are the types who just want it done for them, and then there are the types who will go that extra. And I feel like in anything in life, it's the ones who are going to do that little bit extra that will get further ahead. And I explain this in our panels, in our Zooms. I'm like, guys, we've got 3,000 people here right now. At the end of the 30 days, we'll be lucky if there's 150 people here. And it was actually less than that. I think it got down to like 80. But that process of showing them what to do and then having them tweak it, like that one girl blew my mind. Like her analysis of games, of players. And what I wanted them to do is not think of like Beastmode Soccer as technical training full stop, right? But just individual development. And yes, we can go into another machine of individual development. Technical training is a big cog of it, but we can also help with a lot more stuff in that individual development. And again, that opened my mind, because we are known for the technical side. Like, let's be honest, we're known for footwork drills that people hate on because there's some cones and people go really fast, right? Fact. And that's my fault, because that's what we put on social media. And it was a really good thing for me to be able to do, was explain that each footwork drill that we do, that players own, they've tweaked for themselves, so that they now know that is going to help them do whatever their goal was. And that was, honestly, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. Just the young ones, there's two sisters, like they're tiny. I think they're like 7 and 9 or something, but they're real small. And they're emailing me all of this stuff that they're doing. And I emailed the dad, and I'm like, hey, like, listen, like, maybe ease off pushing them into it. And he's like, there you are, no. He's like, they're annoying us at 6 a.m. getting up and doing things. And that's, again, I forgot the question, Tom. But like, that's,
no, yeah.
Do you understand where I'm going with it?
And I think, mate, for me, what you've touched upon is there's a danger with all of us in over adultifying the experience, right? Like it's us suggesting that this is what we need to do, or this is how it should be done. And I think what you've demonstrated, and it's a message for many of the coaches, is like, it's a huge disservice to underestimate the power of a child's imagination, right? And to give them ownership and let them fly, and they'll amaze you. So I think like it's definitely a nice way, because I totally agree with Brighty. I think we've had these conversations about this could be a really great kind of aha moment for the kids. And and seeing an increase in, you know, technical foundation and, you know, their enjoyment of, we speak about like the immediate gratification of getting better with practicing a ball
Yeah.
of war, little skills. But you adding that twist, I think was
what Paul said earlier was spot on. I think it'll be a small percentage, but I genuinely think that this period of time, in 5, 6, 7 years, we will start seeing proper good players coming out of this country with it, because they now know that it's measurable. So if they put in that hard work, I guarantee, and I said this every day in my session, when you get back to practice, it will take you a few sessions to implement everything, all the technical stuff that you've been doing, because at the end of the day, if you're training on your own, it's completely different. You know, you've got a 150-pound player running at you full speed trying to take the ball off you. So there'll be a little bit of a transition, but we're going to start seeing players who really enjoy doing extra, because they're going to get back to the training field, and you're going to see these players have been working hard, these players haven't, and those players have been working hard. I've said this so many times, like, hard work is just as contagious as laziness, because if you were the great player before COVID, and now the players who are all right are more confident than you, they want the ball more than you, that's going to drive you on. You know, and obviously that's not true for everyone. Like a lot of players will just carry on being who they are, which is fine. But I think Paul hit the nail on the head. I think we'll genuinely see a lot of fantastic players coming out of this period, and it will probably be forgotten about because it won't be immediate. It will be 5, 6, 7 years. But he hit the nail on the head.
Well, let's hope so. I think everybody would certainly enjoy that if we did. Brighty, because we ended with you, I'm going to come back to you with this next question. I'm curious. Obviously, we said, you know, yourself and Gary, you've had a lot of conversations with people operating at the elite level of the game, and I'm just curious if there was ever a topic of conversation, an area of study or an area of research that left you feeling a little bit exploited and maybe wanting to learn more. I know, Willow, we maybe had that with cognitive load theory. Was there anything for you, Brighty, that kind of struck a chord of something that I want to go find out more about?
That's every conversation I have in my life, that, Tom.
I didn't want to throw you under the bus today,
every day of my life. You know what? There's so much, and I'm on that. I'm a bit. If I don't know something, it's not that, oh well, no, it's no good. I'm the opposite. I'm like, well, if I need to make an informed opinion of it, I better find out about this. I'm forever throwing myself into rabbit holes and scratching around and Willow knows this. I'm a reader. I'm reading. I'm chasing things to find out, you know, what it's all about. A recent one I read was about the XG stuff with I think is it James Tippett, the data around XG, and again, probably not applicable to 99.9% of coaches, but for me, I didn't know what XG truly was, so I read a full book on it just to find out, well, what is it and where do I go from here. But to really answer your question, because that's about me, but in terms of the wider game and the conversations what we've had, I think there's a shift coming. I could be wrong, but I think there's a shift coming at the elite level in terms of the pro academies. The shift I'm thinking is back towards away from treating young people as mini pros and back towards allowing young people to be children. And I don't want to come across now sounding all fluffy and this, because you know me, I'm not that way anyway. But it's really important now, and Bayern Munich have made the stance, haven't they? We've all heard of this with Bayern Munich getting rid of the youngest age groups within their academy, phasing it out and not recruiting until the age of 12 or 13. I'm not saying just because Bayern have done it that it's going to happen everywhere, but I think that there's a lot of young people in the elite environments who are absolutely hating the game. 14, 15, 16, they hate it because the pressures that have been put on them since the age of 5, 6, 7 years old, they haven't been allowed to be children. They've been mini professionals training 2, 3, 4 times a week. And we all think, you know, more is better. Sometimes less is more. I mean, Martin Diggle talks about it a lot about on our webinar. He's head of coaching at Liverpool. What's the diet of a player in terms of the playing experiences? Are these players allowed to play on the streets? Are they allowed to play with the friends at school? You know, before the DA got abolished, not allowed to play with your friends in high school. That's a key moment in your adolescence growing through. It's nothing to do with football or soccer to some extent. It's playing with your high school friends. So all these experiences, I think there's going to be a shift away within academies the world over, and it may end up with recruitment being at a later date. It may mean less pressure in terms of we've got to get that kid at 6, you know, we've got to get that kid at 7, and the reason why is because they want well-rounded people who've had the childhood, who've had the experiences away from the game. One of the Man United youth team coaches, Hasni Al-Joffrey, you know, Hasni, former pro player, works with the U15s and 16s at Man United, cutting edge. He was saying to his players, you need to have football and something else. You need to go and play an instrument, get involved in something else, what you're passionate about, not just football. It's got to be something else with it, because that's who you are as a person. No, football shouldn't define anybody. It's what we do. It's what we play, or it's what we coach. It's not who you are. It's part of who you are, but it's not who you are. So, and for me to say that, you know, I must have been on a journey, because I've been involved in this game my whole life, and it's football is what I do and what I'm involved in, but it's not who I am. It's part of who I am, but it's not who I am. So I think there's a shift coming. Could be wrong, don't know. But
no, let's hope. I think everybody could attest to hoping that you're right. It's a great answer. Anybody listening, there's the BBC back in England did a great documentary, No Hunger in Paradise. That's also a book that I would highly recommend to people, just to get an insight into the perspective that Paul talks about, and perhaps the dangers of, as we've said again, over adultifying the
statistic on that, Tom. The statistic, I know it off the top of my head, that Rain Man, I know it. It's 0.012% of players who are in a Category 1 academy at the age of 9 will play in the Premier League. 0.012. I think Michael Calvin said young players have got more chance of being hit by a meteorite than making it into the. When you put it like that, it can't just be about football, can it? It can't just be about soccer. We've got a responsibility to make sure these young people walk away with fantastic experiences, a love for the game, and they look back on the time and go, you know what, I loved all of that, and I didn't quite make it, but I absolutely loved it, and it was a great moment in my life. Otherwise, they're never going to come back to the game ever.
No, it's a great point, mate, and thank you so much for sharing that. Gary, I'm curious with this one. Paul's just touched upon the importance of understanding different perspectives of a player's development and everything that goes into it. You've obviously had conversations with some very elite level coaches, and I'm curious as to whether you could speak about who demonstrated, or what was it about them that demonstrated what the best looks and acts like, and why. You know, what was it that really resonated? Because I think the depth of Paul kind of there talking about the importance of the person before the player. I think sometimes we think that people, you said about Martin O'Neill, they make it to the top with maybe not as much of an appreciation about the well-rounded, you know, everything to do with the game, well-rounded development. So is there somebody that stands out? You know, again, Paul just said I didn't understand something, so I went and read a book. Like, was there somebody who kind of, you know, really just struck you down with how much they were invested, and really exemplified, you know, why they are who they are, or why they're getting to do what they get to do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think the podcast as well, whenever you're chatting to someone, something I picked up on a while ago, like Jeremy Gunn, I don't know if you listen to that podcast with, I don't know him, like his messaging is so clear, and you know what he stands for, and so the philosophy is connected to the state of play, which then when you throw him a question on sports science, you've got that there, it's been taken care of, and with new players coming in, recruitment, I think the consistency piece is something that jumps out to me. So obviously Jesse Marsh was someone that, and you kindly helped out to get him, and he was unbelievable. He knocked it out of the ballpark, as you would expect. But the one that surprised me was a guy called Rafał Ulatowski, and he's with director of coaching at Lech Poznań in Poland. And he reached out to me to come on. I didn't know much about him. We just followed each other. He says, Gary, I've got something. And I said, right. So I was a bit cheeky. I set up the call, and then I was going to have a sandwich and just sit and watch it and jump on and facilitate the questions. But I had to, he couldn't, his file was so big that he had to transfer it. We transferred. It took like 20 minutes. The thing was delayed to get set up. And then I had to press all the buttons. So I'm thinking, I'm starving here. I'm not going to get to eat my sandwich. So I was working. The thing lasted an hour and 40 minutes. Like, it was a 20-minute presentation that was an hour and 40 minutes. He had 130 something slides, and one of his slides, no, not one of his slides, like 3 or 4 of his slides was GPS map of the training facility to the ground. So I'm pressing the button here, but I can't see who's, and there's 35, 40 coaches on this. I'm thinking, not going to be 35, 40 coaches when this is finished, I can tell you that, because it'll all be gone. And there was the same amount, maybe 1, maybe 2, but there was the same amount that started it. But his depth of why he showed the GPS map was because you were in a different area of town. The coaches had to drive an hour and a half. There was so many levels of Lech Poznań's philosophy of grit and determination that we all throw around like so casually today, that we all know, well, is that they're going to decide player selection? They've got a team in the reserve league, and they've got a reserve team in the professional league that's trying to stave off relegation. So now you have 18, 19-year-olds within the club that are getting exposed to relegation football pressure. Then you have every team playing a year up, so they're getting exposed to adversity. So now grit is something that's not just a picture on the wall, but grit is now contextualized into football, into their daily life. And it was the best. And then he went to COVID. This is how we're dealing with COVID. And he went to education, and he slammed education. He'd rather have them on the football pitch. So it wasn't just like, oh, we do all this. No, I wish they weren't in the classroom, because it's holding me back from getting them better footballers. And to me, like, that was a breath of fresh air, because you can't tick every box as a coach. Like, but can you focus a bit more on what you want to be about? And to me, his messaging was so clear. But then also, you know, and that's where the interesting thing with this whole lockdown webinars is like, as much as I would like them to 15, 20 minutes, coaches' attention spans, like, no, sometimes it takes you an hour and a half to get some quality. Sometimes it takes you a month to read a book, 2 months, 3 months. So I thought that one changed me, because I thought, then rather than making these short, a Dean Osmond Basic went for 90 minutes as well. Like, if they're long and it takes some time, then that's what it takes. So again, just something that jumps out at you and thinks that maybe I'm doing a disservice for how I'm presenting. You know, I complain all the time away from Twitter that coaches take shortcut with how they consume information. But then am I at fault with how I present the information for them to consume it so cheaply? I don't know. That's kind of the road I'm on at the minute. Is when we go out of this here, is I'm going to take a long, hard look at what I want to be about with how I present it.
That's brilliant, guys, and it's really fascinating stuff. That, yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. With so many of us, like, we use walk your talk, right? It's a cliche phrase, but if you're saying that you believe in something, show it. So the concept there, if grit is at the cornerstone, find ways in everyday environments to facilitate those feelings or to stretch them. Like, I think that's a cracking message. So thank you. Skye, coming to you for this one, and then if you guys are good, we can open it up. I see there's quite a lot of dialogue going on in the chat boxes, sorry. But Skye, you know, we've spoken a lot offline, and these guys are great examples of people that have, obviously, we started the conversation, given so much. But, you know, during this time, my question is, how do we keep the positive momentum of sharing, of learning, of collaboration going when we return to the chaos of everyday life? Because, David, as you've said, Bright, as you've said, we want the kids to keep engaging with the ball. But for coaches, I think as our own society, the game will be in a better place if the same learning, the love of learning that's been demonstrated in this time can keep going, and it's not just a, you know, a one-stop shop. So any thoughts with that?
That's a great question, Tom, and it's a really important one for us to be thinking about right now. You know, I spend so much time at Soccer Prank. The last year, you all heard this presentation, many of you down in Florida. I've been presenting about sense of community theory and the research behind that. And I've been presenting about how clubs can create a sense of community, what the steps are to that, so that we'll have player retention, higher player inspiration, parent satisfaction, all of those things. And the concepts and the theory behind this is this idea of developing a sense of group membership, having a sense of need fulfillment, making sure you're identifying what the needs are, fulfilling those needs, that the people in the group feel like they have influence in the group, and that there's a shared emotional connection. And I think what we need to do is we need to say, hey, we need to do this with our coaching group. It's one thing to do this with our clubs, which is essential, but we need to live this ourselves and create a sense of community within this coaching community that has really shined brightly during this time. And so I would ask that we think about how we can, as a group, have group membership, how we can fulfill what our needs are, how they can be fulfilled, how we can have influence even within this group. And you know, how we can have the shared emotional connection, which we've been gifted with during this time, as we've had so much opportunity to interact with one another. And I have a few key things. One is that we need to be open. Gary, I think you talked about, you know, barriers to entry. Like, we need to open the floodgates to coaches that are seeking more, that are curious, that might be insecure and not know how to ask the right question. We have got to lead and push past that and bring them into this fold and show them how powerful of an impact they can have and how wonderful this community really is. I want us to feel and really understand the power that we have amongst ourselves. And we have to be really, really intentional. All of us, I think everyone here today has used the word reflection. And what I would love to see people do is to take an hour, a serious hour, and reflect on what they've personally gotten out of this, what their strengths have been, you know, where they have had sort of limited behavior and areas they need to improve upon, and then write it out, find an accountability partner, share these ideas, put it on paper, post it socially, find a place for us to come together as a community to really to share these, because that's how we're going to see the growth. And the biggest thing, Bridie, you said, I don't want to seem like I'm all fluffy and say that I care. Like, we are going to see change when that is not even crossing your mind as a statement you have to say. That when we treat these kids as human beings, that when we are so supportive of them and think about them and care about them as individual human beings, and we unprofessionalize the sport and speak to what the kids and the players need, that is going to be when we've really, really continued this momentum. And that's what I hope for all of us, because this is a really powerful group, the soccer community. We all know how much it's given us individually, and we need to continue this momentum, absolutely, and we can.
For sure, Skye, thank you. That was some brilliant remarks and very well received from some of the members of the audience, so thank you for that. And anytime you can get Brighty to chuckle is a win for me as well. So just to the rest of you three, if you know anything to add on that, obviously, like, there is in my opinion, there's a bit of a duty of care for us to also stay at the forefront of things, right? It can't be, Gary, you've obviously done a tremendous job for a long, long time. You know, Dave, you too, with all the player stuff. Obviously, we've been afforded a little bit more of an opportunity to be perhaps more frequent. But any kind of thoughts from any of you three about action steps? Go on, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think we're at a stage now, and you know, everyone's always going to support free content, right? Everyone's always going to, but there will be a choice that people have opened their doors and people have opened their content. There's also the business aspect as well. Like, you can't just give away the key. Like, Coaching Manual can't be free for a whole year. For, like, they've got employees, they've got it. So Skye's the same. Davis, they can't give away the stuff. So it's at a stage where what is going to be free and what is going to be paid for, and that's where I think it might move from a business model, is that, you know, you might not be getting the information, but whereas David was saying there about the connections with that personal touch with the coach, or that personal touch. I know, Brady, the work that you guys do with clubs and helping Skye, obviously, my God, the work that you do with it, that's going to be the difference maker. So now, in terms of coach education space, is that, because there's a lot of people that are very impersonal with coach education that are making a lot of money. And I would like to see that challenge. Like, if you're going to go into this space and you're going to try and do something, then don't just put your money where your mouth is, but also put a bit more detail into putting something out. Stand by it, help people with it, challenge people with it, rather than putting stuff out and costing an arm and a leg.
I've 100% back Gary on everything he's just said there. There's been a huge explosion in the number of people releasing content and stuff, which is great. But like I said at the start, know as an individual what you're looking for as an organisation. However, it comes back to what Willow says, and define your why as well. Why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? We've always stood as an organisation with the coaching line. We're all former players and coaches, and we've all got a massive love for the game. Our office is like a dressing room. It's bonkers. You know some of the guys, the proper soccer people, but they ooze the passion for the game. And you know, if we could do it for free, we would. But like Gary just said, can't pay our mortgage and buy food on backslaps and compliments. We give loads away for free. But what we do is quality, we believe. And the why is because we want to help coaches, players and parents fall in love with the game and get better at the game, get better knowledge of the game. So then it develops these lifelong habits, the social ties, the understanding of the game, all of the spin-offs. And you know what? If a couple of players off the back of what we do and the coaches become professional, brilliant. But that's not the aim. Never been the aim. It's the cream will always rise to the top. The top players always find a way. I think David was saying some of that as well, and they'll do their extras. But we want to help, support, and improve the game. We're on that journey. We're on, same with everyone on this call. Spoke to the majority of you and known you for a while. So it's being on that journey of, can we help people improve the game? We don't preach. We've got good people. We've got good knowledge. We've got good contacts. We've got a great platform, like many of you have. But it's decisions and it's choice. And hopefully our why and what we stand for resonates with you. And that's it. That's all we can do. So I 100% agree with Gary. And people have just got to recognise, where are you going? What do you want? And ultimately, always bring it back to these young people. We have a duty of care to these young people massively, and it can't just be to generate revenue. Yes, there's got no problem in generating revenue, but it's the thing what's most paramount is the young person or the young people under our guidance and under our care. That's why the coaching manual was formed. It's not just about the coaches, it's to ensure that the players have a fantastic environment and experience. So, I've just said great work by everyone and what everyone's doing, and long may it continue as well.
Yeah, Brady, thank you so much, mate. And I think all we can do is echo that, just by saying, obviously there's reasons why people come together, and there's reasons why you guys we all do what we do. And I would just kind of close with a call to action from the coaches. And it's been a topic of conversation that's been shared on a number of occasions over these talks. And we often ask our players to go and give more, to go and do more, right? And at some point soon, that's not going to be easy. Just like it's not going to be easy for us as coaches to access, you know, content multiple hours of every day that's being pushed out, but it'll be a conscious decision. And if we're going to be prepared to ask them, then we have to be prepared to embody that same mentality and demonstrate that, hey, when it does, you know, a subscription to something costs maybe, I don't know, 2 coffees a month, right? Let's break it out into real life examples of, there's such great momentum and there's been such a transition for me in terms of the intentionality with which coaches have professionalized their job perhaps over the last few months, that if we can continue when there are more barriers there, when we do have a choice to make and it's easy to say no, then I think we'll see real change. And, you know, I'm certain, you know, knowing you guys as I do and everybody that's on the line, it's, you know, it will be championed by people like you guys. It'll be championed by the people that, you know, that we consider fortunate to be our friends. But let's kind of hope that the momentum that's been generated from these last few months can continue to do everything that Brighty and Gary have referenced. So guys, I'm really conscious that we've had an hour and 15 of your time. I know everybody's days are super jam-packed and busy. Just again, on behalf of myself and Mark and Team Beyond Pulse, can't thank you guys enough for the generosity of your time and insight. As we said, vulnerability, humility, honesty as well. I think it's a great example that you guys have delivered for everybody that's listening now or in the future. So just thank you all so much for taking the time out to be of assistance. Willow, closing remarks?
Yeah, not to be Jerry Springer and have a final thought, but I think, you know, it's a privilege for us to have people like you on our educational webinars. You bring such a wealth of experience and knowledge and insight. It's perspective that I think is really going to help things change. It's not seeing it through one lens, it's multiple lenses that are able to collaborate and really get the best out of every environment we operate in. So massive thank you from everybody here at Beyond Pulse. We'll continue to support you in your quest to improve the experience for everybody involved in the game, and we'll also look to collaborate in the future moving forward. Thanks for everybody joining as well.
Yeah, guys, so thank you, and we look forward to you guys being with us again next week. Stay tuned online for the schedule, and obviously thank you again for choosing Beyond Pulse as your dose of education this Friday.
Thank you for